Marshall, Missouri isn't home to much. It's a small community with about 13,000 people, but it is home to a museum and memorial garden that honors a Llewellyn setter that lived more than 80 years ago. Jim the Wonder Dog was a dog like no other, and has a story that captivates the many people that visit the area. Jim was born in Louisiana in 1925. He was considered the runt in a litter of 7. Many who saw Jim when he was a pup described him as the most ungodly pup they've ever seen. Little did they know that this pup would grow into one of the most fascinating dogs in history. Jim was sent to Missouri to be gifted to a man named Sam Van Arsdale, an avid hunter and traveler who would later manage the Ruff Hotel in Marshall. Van Arsdale didn't think much of the pup at first, but noticed something about Jim that was different from other dogs: his eyes. Jim had big, almost human-like eyes. Van Arsdale noticed early on that Jim's gaze gave the impression that he could understand what people said to him. Van Arsdale eventually sent Jim to a dog trainer named Ira Irvine to help Jim learn how to hunt. From there, it was very clear that Jim was different from most dogs. During his training, Jim often wouldn't participate. Instead, he would sit underneath a tree in the shade and observe. Van Arsdale didn't know what to make of this at first, but eventually gave Jim a chance during a hunting trip. Jim proved to be an excellent hunting dog, helping Van Arsdale hunt over 5,000 birds on their many trips together. Jim's hunting abilities were so good that he was recognized in magazines as the hunting dog of the country. Hunting was just one of Jim's many talents. It was on a hunting trip like any other where Van Arsdale discovered some of Jim's other abilities.
The famous story that everybody likes to tell is the one where they were out hunting and he said, "Let's go sit under this hickory tree." And Jim went over and sat under the hickory tree. He thought that was a little bit strange because the dog knew which one the hickory tree was. He figured, well, just by chance, he just happened to go around. So, well, let's go sit under the oak tree. And Jim went over and sat under the oak tree. And so he did a couple more, and Jim did those right. And there was no stump there. And he said, "Jim, is there a stump here?" And Jim went over and put his foot on the stump. About that time, he went over and sat on the stump because he was getting really kind of shaky in the knees. He realized this dog could do exactly what he asked him to do.
Van Arsdale wasn't sure what to do after discovering Jim's talents. He initially wanted to keep it to himself because he feared being called crazy. But it wasn't long before Van Arsdale began showing off Jim's talents to crowds that had gathered around the Ruff Hotel. Van Arsdale would give Jim certain tasks, like to identify a young girl in a red dress.
When Mary Burge was about 5 years old, she was in the hotel, the Ruff Hotel here, where Jim lived. And she was with a bunch of school kids, which was pretty common for the school kids to come see Jim. They like to come see Jim and have him do different things. And so at that time they were in the lobby and all the kids were standing around, and Sam asked Jim to go find the girl in a little red dress. And so Jim went out across the lobby and sat down in the middle and just sat there. And Sam said, "Find the girl in the red dress." He just sat there. And so he looked around and noticed there was more than one girl with a red dress, so Jim didn't know what to do. And so he said, "Go to the girl with the polka dot dress." And Jim just continued to sit there. And he looked around, there was 2 girls with red polka dot dresses, and so he said, "Go to the girl with the polka dot bow in her hair." And he went over to Mary Burge and put his paw on Mary Burge when she was 5 years old. Well, she kept the little red dress, which we have here, and she used it throughout her life. She'd take that dress around, talk to school kids and different ones about Jim the Wonder Dog and show the dress and tell the story how Jim picked her out. And she gave us that dress several years ago because she wanted to make sure it stayed here. Well, Mary died 4 or 5 years ago. So as far as we know, she was the last one who actually saw Jim.
Jim's ability to identify colors was especially peculiar because dogs have dichromatic vision, meaning they can only perceive 2 of the primary colors. Dogs cannot see reds, like pink, purple, or orange. But Jim's other abilities went way beyond seeing color. Over time, Van Arsdale began to discover that Jim could understand foreign languages, written words, and Morse code. This was on full display when Van Arsdale had Jim evaluated by Dr. Adrian Jackson Durant from the University of Missouri. Durant recruited several Mizzou colleagues and had a Paramount crew film the evaluation. The medical examination done on Jim found nothing out of the ordinary, but Durant wanted to see Jim in action. Durant had language professors give Jim commands in Italian, French, German, and Spanish. Jim complied with every request. The results of the tests had professors baffled. Durant said that Jim must possess an occult power beyond our understanding. Van Arsdale had Jim perform at a variety of locations all over Missouri, including the State Fair and at a joint session of the Missouri State Assembly. It was during the 1930s when Van Arsdale discovered another one of Jim's abilities, the ability to predict the future. Jim successfully predicted the winner of the Kentucky Derby 7 straight years. Jim was also able to predict the sex of unborn babies. Jim also predicted the winner of the 1936 presidential election and World Series. Jim's accomplishments and performances earned him a great deal of fame, which attracted a great number of business offers from Hollywood and dog food companies. Van Arsdale turned down offers as high as $100,000, which would have been hard for anyone living during the Great Depression. But Van Arsdale didn't want to sell out Jim's abilities. Jim and Van Arsdale spent many years traveling and performing together, entertaining crowds and turning skeptics into believers. However, in March of 1937, shortly after Jim's 12th birthday, he collapsed while out on a trip at the Lake of the Ozarks. Van Arsdale rushed Jim to a veterinary hospital in Sedalia, but he didn't make it in time. Jim died shortly after arriving. Van Arsdale wanted to have Jim buried with his family in Marshall, but ran into some complications.
And he wanted to bury him at the cemetery here in town, and people at the cemetery said you can't put a dog in a people's cemetery. So Sam looked around, he found somebody on a little bit of land next to the cemetery, and so that's where he ended up putting him next to the cemetery. Well, I like to tell the story that Jim got the last laugh because later on the cemetery expanded and now Jim's in with the people. Not much they can do about it. And so if you go out there today, you can find Jim's grave, and there's other plots of people right next to him. And he's the most visited grave in the Ridge Park Cemetery. And he always has coins or toys or dog treats or something that people leave on his grave out there.
While Jim may have died over 80 years ago, he has not been forgotten. Several books and articles have been written about his life. There is a museum that houses information, pictures, and memories of his 12 years on this planet. In 1999, a memorial garden was built in his honor. The Jim the Wonder Dog Memorial Garden was built exactly where the Ruff Hotel used to stand. Many people today aren't able to make heads or tails of Jim's abilities. Jim and Sam Van Arsdale were able to turn many skeptics into believers during their performances, but people today can only hear about him from stories. It is easy to doubt the validity of stories about a hyperintelligent and seemingly psychic dog, but there are plenty of believers out there. We may never understand the full nature of Jim's abilities, but crazier things have happened throughout human history.
Nobody would ever believe that a dog could do the things that Jim did. I have no doubts he was able to do it. Now, how he was able to do it's another question. I wish somebody could have explored that more when he was alive in some way.
Perhaps Jim's greatest power was his ability to serve as a beacon of hope for people who lived during the Depression era. His story still resonates with people today. And that is what truly makes Jim the Wonder Dog one of a kind.